For those who were just waiting for a few minutes, we had a lengthy closed session of council, which ran a little bit over time, hence our late start at 7:10 this morning. We'd like to start the meeting with the singing of our national anthem, please.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, a true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you to David Nairn, Artistic Director of Theatre Orangeville, for that rendition of our national anthem. We would like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa of the Three Fires Confederacy. This meeting is being aired on public television and or streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. At our closed session, we're going to rise and report on the matters discussed at our closed session. There's a recommendation that the 2021 August 9th closed council meetings be approved, and that committee appointments, official plan steering committee, CPS 2021-063 regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, be received. And that Mr. Chris DeCastro and Mr. Richard Magcott be appointed to the official plan steering committee. And that implications for non-decision appeals by Cachet Developments, Orangeville Inc., and Sarah Properties Limited, and options for the Humberlands, INS 2020-051 regarding a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by municipality or local board, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, be received. And that the confidential verbal report from Ed Brennan, CAO, and John Hart, Town Solicitor, regarding ORDC lands, regarding the proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, be received, and that a confidential verbal report from Ed Brennan, CAO, regarding vaccination policy, regarding advice, again, subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, be received, and that staff proceed as directed. Can we have a motion for that, please? Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Thank you.
Yes.
Item 10, the adoption of minutes of a previous council meeting. Could we have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of the August 9th, 2021 council meeting? Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor?
Yes.
Great. Moving forward to presentations, petitions, and or delegations. We have Kim Delahunt, President and CEO of Headwaters Healthcare Center, along with Jennifer Hamilton, Director of Communications and Stakeholders of Headwaters Healthcare, with Tom Reed, the Chief of Dufferin County Paramedic Service, regarding the Hospital Foundation's priority campaigns. So Ms. Delahunt, Ms. Hamilton, and Mr. Reed, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight, and I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brown. Good evening, and good evening, Council. It's our pleasure to be here this evening. I am going to share my screen if I will be allowed, but before I begin, I was hoping to formally request a few extra minutes for my delegation, as I do fear I may go over 5 minutes. If
Yes.
Mayor Brown, you will entertain a few extra minutes.
I
Wonderful.
don't think of anything more important than our hospital, so please, you're
Wonderful. Thank
welcome
you.
to go ahead.
Thank you. So just confirming that you can all see my slides on the screen there.
Yes.
Wonderful. So I am really pleased to be here tonight to share the results from our work to implement and advance our strategic plan that was launched back in 2019, which definitely seems like a long time ago. And I am happy to report this evening that as an organization with support from our board of directors, we have extended our strategic plan for another 2 years. And despite the pressures of the pandemic, we were actually able to progress our strategic plan on many fronts, and it is still truly relevant to the work that is needed, and that will continue to be the compass for our organization over the coming years. As you can imagine, the pandemic has touched every part of our operational and financial footings at Headwaters. It has played a role in every decision, action, and response at Headwaters since early 2020, and continues to do so, quite frankly, as we work to minimize disruption to non-COVID related hospital services and continue to offer all the services that we provided pre-pandemic. I am pleased to share with you what we've been doing over the past year, and among our many activities, I'll touch on a few. We did rapidly assemble a new branch of operations, obviously, to manage our pandemic services and response. And that included staffing and operating a very busy COVID-19 assessment center. We redeployed staff across the hospital. We managed personal protective equipment sourcing and distribution for our community partners as well. And of course, we adjusted to rapidly changing new guidelines to always ensure patient and staff safety was maintained. And we also tried to and continue to increase our communication efforts to disseminate vital information. And those are just some of the activities. In regards to our accomplishments, there are many on this slide. I won't speak to them all. I just want to highlight a few of them. At Headwaters, we have now completed over 89,000 tests at our COVID-19 assessment center. As well, we have completed over 5,000 internal lab swabs to support our inpatients and our emergency patients. We have also, at one point, we opened 20 additional beds as a result of increased hospitalizations and to support the transfer of patients from across the GTA. We've also ramped down and ramped up our hospital services several times as we have followed provincial directives. And we have implemented new screening protocols for anyone entering into the hospital. And we actually set up our own staff and physician screening app. So there are many things that we've done over the past year. In terms of our community connections, our engagement with community partners was certainly enhanced this past year with the expansion of a very successful community paramedicine program. Together with partners, we established 24-hour mental health coverage for youth under 18. The Hills of Headwaters Ontario Health Team implemented their Caregiver ID project that recognizes and validates the role of the caregiver within healthcare. And inside the hospital, we advanced our own patient family advisor partnership, extending its membership and involvement in our operations. Our annual report this past year involved many patient and family advisors, as well as a local graphic designer who volunteered their time and talents to design the report. And we also had it printed courtesy of a local printer. And as you read through the pages of this year's annual report, you will see the little heroes that are on the cover sample there. And they each represent one of our values at Headwaters of kindness, courage, passion, and teamwork. And those little heroes represent that part in all of us who wants to cheer on those who inspire, provide hope, and help us feel safe now more than ever. And we do hope that they also make you smile. In terms of progress over the past year with regards to our people, our hospital could not provide the excellent care we offer every day without our staff. And I really want to take a moment to pause and just to recognize all of the staff across Headwaters as we continue to navigate the lasting impacts of COVID-19 and work on post-pandemic planning, even in the midst of the pandemic still. and we focus on rebuilding and growing, our staff continue to be guided by our values each and every day, and they truly are heroes. They have been challenged to work in new ways and do even more to ensure the safety of our patients, community, and each other. At every turn and hurdle we have faced as an organization, our team has continued to rise to the occasion. Having adequate health human resources is a province-wide challenge now. The past 18 months have been particularly difficult for everyone working in healthcare, and we are seeing early retirements, career changes, increases in sick time and leaves, and shortages in specialty nursing roles, which are all contributing to what we are experiencing now. We are doing all that we can at Headwaters to ensure we continue to build and support our teams across our organization. It is amazing that over the past year, our foundation actually had a record year for fundraising at Headwaters, as they did raise over $5 million, which really speaks to the incredible ability of our community to support the hospital, and also to the resourcefulness of the foundation team, who had to move many of its activities to an online format. To continue their efforts this year, there's this month's Municipality Challenge, which is encouraging members of Dufferin Caledon communities to get active for a good cause to help purchase equipment for our hospital. And the Tour to Headwaters is actually happening this coming Saturday, and registration is still possible. And our volunteers, as listed on this slide, have been providing valuable service to the hospital and our patients. And a safe return to duties plan is currently being developed for our hospital volunteers to return back to the hospital. In terms of quality and our focus on quality this past year, one item from this list that I want to focus on this evening is that we continue to build a health information system for one patient record with Collingwood General Marine Hospital, Georgian Bay General Healthcare Central, and Royal Victoria Hospital. And we actually go live with this new system. So it's called Meditech Expanse, or it's branded as Care4. We go live with this new system this coming Saturday, September 18th. This new system is creating a shared electronic medical record system across all 4 organizations. And it's actually going to enable a more seamless flow of information between our hospital and all of our departments as well. Patient safety and quality of care is our top priority during this transition and implementation. And during the first while, in the first days, weeks, patients may experience longer than normal wait times. We are reaching out in advance to let people know this in a variety of ways, as well as providing them with information, as this is a really large implementation. It's very exciting for us. Our hospital foundation continues to fundraise to support this vital new health information system, as these types of upgrades are not funded by the Ministry of Health. And I just wanted to share that this is an over $7 million initiative for Headwaters for our hospital. It is all very exciting. In terms of progress at our facility over the past year, while we justifiably had to delay some planned facility improvement projects, we were able to successfully complete construction to our main lobby and front entrance and upgrade and repair our ventilation system, and actually complete some roofing upgrades in many areas. Ensuring our hospital building is safe and well prepared, it enables us to focus on our care of patients and provide a positive working environment for our Headwaters team. So it is very important to us. As you can appreciate, our work since last March has been altered due to the pandemic. However, our team did an amazing job shifting gears, and they continue to do so. Looking forward this year, we're focusing on rebuilding, all the while planning for a possible and imminent 4th wave, and also the surge in activity that we generally have in the fall and winter. While we know the impact of COVID-19 will continue to be felt for many months to come, we feel positive about the increasing levels of vaccination across Ontario and with the various policies coming out. And these things combined will help stabilize the healthcare system and allow us to refocus our priorities. I'm going to pause just for a moment on our financial year-end results. As you can imagine, the COVID-19 pandemic did impact the financial landscape. There was great uncertainty regarding various reporting mechanisms, expense reconciliation, and as the pandemic has now lasted over 2 fiscal years, it has put a bit of a wrench into some of our reporting and year-end results. You may recall that the last fiscal year we ended with a deficit of approximately 700,000, and this fiscal year we ended with an approximately 700,000 surplus. This is mainly due to funding that we received this fiscal year for expenses that were incurred the previous fiscal year. So the surplus at this fiscal year end is really due to a misalignment of timing due to funding. In terms of looking forward, as we do, we're all excited and we do really want to focus on what's on the horizon. I am pleased to share that, our post-pandemic recovery plans are underway. We talk about getting back on track. We're planning, we're reprioritizing. The pandemic has been very challenging, but we have also learned to do things differently. And there are some linings and some silver linings, I should say, and some things that have improved as a result. And this is really an opportunity to build back better. We are rebuilding and refocusing our clinical program areas under the leadership of our new Vice President, Patient Experience, Health Integration, and Chief Nursing and Health Disciplines Executive. That's Anne-Marie Sutherland on this slide. And as I mentioned, we're launching our shared health information system later this week with some hospital partners, and it's very exciting. We will resume looking at hospital improvement opportunities that will assess areas for savings and efficiencies, as we always want to ensure that every dollar we receive is spent in a way that delivers value for our community. Our emergency department renovations will be revisited in a few months once we're out of the fourth wave. We continue our preparation for our accreditation in January 2022. And as I mentioned, we are continually looking at our recruitment efforts, as we have felt pressures over the past number of weeks and months in several areas, including critical care and the emergency department most recently, as I'm sure you heard about. I am so grateful for our many community partnerships, and each year at our annual general meeting, we present the Dr. David Scott Award. It's an award that is named after retired surgeon and lifelong Orangeville resident, the late Dr. David Scott, who came to Orangeville in 1962 as the town's first specialist in general surgery. And as we know, he dedicated his life to improving the health and wellness of our community. And this year's recipients are Dr. Nicola Mercer, CEO and Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Matthew Tenenbaum, Associate Medical Officer of Health, and the entire Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health team. And this team really emulates the true essence of the Dr. David Scott Award, that of an organization that has made a positive impact on the quality of care through their service to the community. And I think we all know that we can rely on our partners in public health to always provide us with accurate guidance, direction, and information to be true partners in care. So just to close off, while we have faced our share of unprecedented challenges, again, I am incredibly proud of the team at Headwaters and proud of the relationships that we have with our community partners. I want to thank every one of them for helping to make us better every day. And I am also very optimistic that we will come out of this pandemic with many lessons learned and opportunities to help us achieve our purpose of one community caring together. Thank you very much, Mayor Brown and Council, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And I will stop sharing. If I can, here we go. I'll stop. There we go.
Very good. Ms. Delahunt, thank you very much for the presentation. On behalf of the council, I want to thank you and your staff for going through all of the difficult things that you did over the past year and a half, coming on 2 years soon. You've done some heroic work, and we all thank you very much on behalf of all the residents of Orangeville and surrounding area who you serve. Thank you. Councillors, anybody wish to comment? I think I said it all. So very much, again, appreciate all of your hard work and all of your great team. And I know that the challenges continue to be presented to you, and you're up to the task, and I wish you well in everything going forward. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and good to see you again, Kim. Appreciate your presentation. I can't help but wonder, are we not going to hear anything from the amazing Tom Reed? Like, has he got nothing to share tonight? You can't just let them go.
Oh, yes, you can. Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor.
Well, he's there in support, and we appreciate him and his team as well. So thank you, Mr. Reed. All right. Well, we're going to move on to our next item.
Thank you.
And thank you for providing this presentation tonight.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brown and Council. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to 11.2. We have Mr. John Lefebvre. Mr. Lefebvre, are you with us?
I hope I am. Am I visual yet?
No, oh, there you are. Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Brown and Council. Similarly, I have a presentation. I've narrowed it down to 2 pages. If anything, it's come out at 5 minutes and maybe 5 minutes and 30 seconds, but I hopefully nothing more than that. So I will proceed as on at a pace. If I get rambling too quickly, please someone tell me to slow down. Oh, so as I said, my name is John Lefebvre, and I'm speaking this evening on my own behalf at 135 Brenda Boulevard, and on behalf of my neighbors at 139 Brenda Boulevard and 131 Brenda Boulevard, who support this presentation. In the early spring months, we 3 adjacent southern neighbors to the Canadian Reformed Church were shocked to see a very large industrial-sized HVAC unit being installed in less than 3 feet from the 139 Brenda's property line and approximately 6 feet from my 135 Brenda Street property line. For some context, when all of us purchased our houses within the last 10 years, the church building and their small air conditioning units were about 40 or 50 feet away and were separated by flora and some fauna and 7 or 8 40 to 60 foot tall mature pine trees. And during that time, there were never any nuisance sound issues or anything like that. Our goal this evening is to seek council's assistance to have the HVAC unit moved to the northern side of the building, and if for some reason that is not possible, to find an effective method to mitigate the noise nuisance. On June 22nd, on our behalf, I wrote to the town asking how an HVAC unit of that size could be placed so close to our properties. The town responded that there's no setback requirements for this item. They also confirmed that the original approved site plan did show this HVAC equipment on the roof of the building. However, a change order was requested in January 2020. And as the proposed location did not contravene the town zoning bylaw, the change was allowed. Well, we, the residents, believe that back in January 2020, there were no physical or infrastructure requirements that necessitated the placement of the HVAC unit on the southern side of the building. At that time, there were 4 sides of the building to choose from to locate the unit. The southern churchyard is now a very narrow corridor of land with 3 residential properties alongside. All the other sides had and have hundreds of feet, literally hundreds of feet of space available and no residential neighbors. I have to ask, why did the town never raise this and the potential view and noise nuisance issues for their neighbors with the church when they requested the change order? We also stated to the town that surely this bylaw couldn't apply between institutional properties and residences. The industrial HVAC unit servicing the church is for a 1,642 square meter institutional building and is 10 to 15 times the size of a typical cylindrical residential air conditioning unit. Infrastructure Services Planning responded by reiterating the fact that they are required to use a non-specific bylaw which most closely resembles the subject matter in question. Well, they also stated that in terms of compliance, that the town is responsible for administering its zoning bylaw and carries the final authority for how the bylaw is to be interpreted and applied. Well, does that mean that town staff in future similar situations will continue to review and decide on a case-by-case basis with no recognition of adjacent neighbors, or is a precedent now set that all industrial-sized HVAC units are permitted in Orangeville right up to the property lines of all residential neighbors? We believe that town staff did not act in a targeted or vindictive way. They just followed what I believe are lax rules that are in place and as they understood them. And to be honest, I think they're just plain thoughtless regarding the impact on the residential adjacent neighbors. For many years during the summer months, we neighbors have enjoyed our backyard with family and friends. We regularly have dinner outside. But now we have to contend with an ongoing HVAC buzz and hum that is substantial, even with the mitigation efforts that have already been put in place. We hear the buzz and hum at every location in our backyards and in every room on the north church-facing side of our houses. In June, July, and August, Orangeville had a total of 61 days over 25 degrees Celsius, with 22 of those days being over 30 degrees Celsius. That HVAC machine was running a lot, causing us a good deal of stress. And even if the noise nuisance level is just below the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks upper limit, it is still substantial and oppressive. In conclusion, we ask that the HVAC unit be placed on the north side of the building. With the current location of the unit, we will continue to face the ongoing impact on the peace and enjoyment of our backyards, as well as devaluing our property values. Any potential buyers for our houses will run for the hills when they see the size of that HVAC unit, unless this is rectified. And lastly, we're hopeful, Mayor Brown and councillors, that you can somehow find a way to help us with our plight. Surely the response in this particular situation is not, well, there's no specific rule, the church and the town can do what they want, and you property owners will just have to live with that. There must be a way to significantly mitigate the impact. The last note is the Brian's Fuel representative, who recently took sound measurements, was quite concerned. And he suggested that some structure could be built around the HVAC unit with soundproofing between the walls, and that would be effective. Thank you for your time. That's all I have to say.
Okay. I wonder if I could call on Mr. Ward. Can you just give us a recap, Mr. Ward, perhaps, of maybe the testing that went on, the decibel levels, and maybe what mitigation the town has done to this point, if you wouldn't mind?
Certainly, Your Worship, and through you, in response to the concerns received with respect to the noise performance of the new or upgraded HVAC equipment in this same location, staff coordinated with the residents in the area, as well as the contractor, to conduct sound level measurements while the equipment was in operation. They also conducted the measurements without the equipment in operation to understand what the baseline sound levels were at this location. They did so following, to the best extent they could, based on their understanding of the ministry guidelines with respect to sound measurements and guide level thresholds for an urban area such as Orangeville. The measurements were observed to be baseline conditions relative to the performance of the new system, represented about a 3 decibel level increase from that non-operational baseline condition. The performance of the system based on those sound level measurements was confirmed to operate well within the ministry threshold of about 40 to 60 decibels. I think the average came in at around 55 decibels. Based on that, staff are confident that the system is performing within those ministry guidelines. And notwithstanding that, earlier on in response to the initial concerns, staff worked with the contractors to put in some mitigation measures. That included additional cedar tree screening between the units and the HVAC equipment, and the adjacent residential properties. They also installed custom prefabricated baffling panels to sort of deflect or dissipate the noise. So considerable measures have been taken in an effort to address these concerns, and staff feel that the mitigation has proven to fall within the ministry guidelines, and we feel there's no further issue for the town's perspective with respect to mitigation. And as Mr. Lefebvre alluded to, if there's additional mitigation that they feel is necessary, perhaps that should be pursued between themselves and the church property owners.
Right. Mr. Ward, you mentioned about baseline measurements there. Can you share with us what those baseline measurements were? Decibel level?
Sure, Your Worship. If I recall correctly, they were around 50 to 52 decibels,
Right.
in around that range.
Okay, so the ambient noise is in the 50 to 52 degree decibel range, and with the machine running, it's 55. Is that correct? Mr. Lefebvre, what do you want us to do, sir? I mean,
I just say that the top
baseline,
end
it's difficult.
the top end of the decibel level is 60 decibels. So we're running at, that machine's running at 55 decibels. So, I mean, as I say, it's within the limits set by the Ministry of Environment, but it is still significant and impactful. I don't know how to put this, but I can't imagine, if you can just look at this 1 second as personally, if this happened to you in your backyard with a machine that is that big and that loud, even though it's just under the limit. I mean, what are we supposed to do? I mean, it ran almost all of July. I mean, it's overwhelming. It really is, and I know it meets these levels, but what are we supposed to do? What do we do?
Before I turn it over to my other councillors, I just, I asked Mr. Ward about the ambient noise. The ambient noise is 50 to 52 decibels, sir. That's what is there all the time. So, just the urban environment noise.
Well, that's wind and that, but this is a hum and a buzz. It's not like, occasional car passing by and wind blowing and honking here and there. It's a constant, and it goes off and on, 5 to 7 times an hour and it runs for about 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes when it's hot. So, I mean, I understand that this machine is there. And it's there, and everyone allowed it to be there. But it's really I can't imagine that this has happened to us as neighbors. Like, what happened here? I don't get it.
Okay, let me ask my colleagues here, Mr. Andrews and Mr. Taylor. Mr. Andrews, you go ahead, sir.
Well, actually, Councillor Taylor
was first?
had his hand up first. So
My apologies.
That's okay.
I was looking at Mr. Lefebvre and didn't realize. Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Andrews, and thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Lefebvre, I'm just curious on 2 things. One is, have you spoken to the church and what was their feedback? And now that you've already gone through Mr. Ward and town staff, have you followed up with the Ministry of Environment, and what did they say?
Well, to be frank, the report that was sent to me by Mr. Ward, I received it a couple days before this meeting. I received it at the end of last week. So and it does suggest that I take it up with the Ministry of the Environment and see what they could achieve. But I just got this report. I kind of tried to absorb it and understand what it's saying and what high decibel levels mean and those kinds of things. So I have received that. But I know I keep trying to back it up to why this happened in the first place, in such a way that there was no recognition of these people here that live 3 houses all in a row, and that no one thought that this would be an issue. How come? I mean, I know you don't know, and I don't, you don't know, but you're saying, and I appreciate it's within the law, it's within the bylaw that exists, the non-specific bylaw that deals with air conditioners and awnings, but it's not an air conditioner. It's an industrial HVAC unit, the size of 10 or 15 times the size of an air conditioner, which my neighbor has his air conditioner right beside my house. That's fine. This thing is not that. So anyway, point that way because that's out my door.
Go ahead,
anyway, it's my frustration. I appreciate.
Mr. Lefebvre, I'm not trying to rub sawdust into your wounds here, and I appreciate why this would be upsetting. I think there's 2 other things that need to be done here on your part, and that is the Ministry of Environment as a follow-up, and then the other piece is if you haven't spoken to your neighbors, being the church, I'd just be very curious what their feedback was as well. And I'm not trying to push off our responsibility as council or frustrate you. It's just two other pieces of the puzzle I think would be very helpful to understand.
Well, I mean, believe it or not, the ministry, I mean, not the, well, I will of course approach the ministry. I'll see what they have to say, and if there's anything there that they might recommend. The church, I wrote to them, and when the unit landed, and essentially they kind of said, I don't see why you should be telling us what we can and cannot do on our land. That was the essential response from the church. I mean, love thy neighbor not. So I just there wasn't any kind of the cedar trees are about 3 feet tall and about 8 or 12 inches wide, and it'll take probably past my lifetime for them to have any impact. And again, I think the ratings were measured with the current mitigations that have taken place. Those were the measurements with those on it. So and it's still relatively high. But so I will do that. I could try approaching them again, I guess, and say, but again, I mentioned one of that fellow who did was there during the sound testing in the backyard with Bruce Ewart, and that's the fellow who he said that you should there is a hope in terms of if you wanted to. He did the testing, and he said from Brian's Fuel, and he took the sound measurements, and he goes, and he was kind of thought that was interesting, but he said there is the possibility to put something around like a kind of a wall. You had to leave some space in the bottom for air, but you could fill that two sides with baffling or sound baffling or something that might achieve a result. But I don't know. I could ask the church to do that.
All right. Mr. Lefebvre, I'm going to ask Councillor Andrews to have a comment, and then we'll move on. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and Mr. Lefebvre, thank you for being here and all that you've expressed. And I also know that the town staff have really gone to the nth degree to provide a rather thorough report for us. Myself, like Councillor Taylor, I was going to say almost virtually the same thing, is to, of course, follow through with the recommendations that have been provided by town staff. But as would be the case with any neighbor, you try to bridge the gap and maybe get some understanding. I know that you've attempted or have had some communication, but I would definitely follow through to see if there's some way that, some kind of understanding between your neighbor and yourself, and I'm referring to the church, can provide some support in alleviating this issue. I think that is probably, the next step. I would hope that they continue to be a good neighbor as they continue to be a very good supporter in our community. I think that is probably the best route at this time, and I respect the fact that you've had some additional observation, and maybe some of that detailed information can be provided to the church and maybe the church leaders, the administration, and hopefully they can end up providing some assistance in, of course, alleviating some of the frustration that you've expressed here tonight.
All right. Mr. Lefebvre, I know you've asked us to have this unit moved. I don't know much about HVAC units, but I know that moving that would be in the tens of thousands of dollars. The ductwork would all have to be altered inside the building. I don't even know if it's possible to move the HVAC unit once these things are put in place. I'm not a HVAC expert, but I can for sure, on my construction knowledge, know that it's substantial cost. And, from what I heard from staff, we don't have the legislative ability to force this to happen. I think the sound mitigation, sound attenuation barrier is where we've got to go with this. And, I think, we're supportive of you trying to find that solution. And, but I don't know that we're going to be able to solve this tonight. Councillor Peters, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, thank you, Mr. Lefebvre, for your presentation and the homework and your passion on the issue. I think you hit the nail on the head when you discussed the lack of policy in this area. It sounds like a very small issue and not to get, too much red tape involved, but if I could, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ward, could you comment on the relevant bylaw for setbacks and noise, if one exists, and when it would be up for review again? Because I think we need to keep instances like this in our mind when we refresh those bylaws and look for those gaps and holes and try to plug them.
Mr. Ward.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Peter. So the bylaw that regulates this matter is referred to this evening as a zoning bylaw. It's the provision is under general provisions, which apply to all lands broadly throughout the town. And it speaks to certain elements, including air conditioners, heat pumps, and so forth, as being permitted within any yard. So they are not subject to any building setbacks that apply to buildings or structures in the property. And the reason for that is the bylaw recognizes that these sort of features serve a utility function of the building. So there's more to dictate where their placement is situated on the property in terms of the building's function and how it's designed and configured and such. Those are very precise elements that go into a building design. So it is prudent for the bylaw to not try to arbitrarily regulate or prohibit where they ought to be or how far back they may be set back. So that's why they are permissible so broadly in the zoning bylaw. With that said, perhaps there might be consideration to going forward to look at some provisions that ought to be looked at very cautiously, because based on that utility function of these units, if we were to introduce new regulations, if there are many units out there that don't meet those regulations, then they need to upgrade themselves or be modified in whatever way, shape, or form. They would find themselves at odds with the bylaw, needing to seek special approvals just to upgrade or seek those improvements. So it's a bit of a slippery slope. My experience is showing that these sort of elements are typically regulated for the purpose of aesthetics. They're sort of want to be obscured from, the public domain, and that's generally how they're at most their placement is maybe dictated.
So may I ask Brandon, has there never been a consideration for a bylaw specifically dealing with industrial sized HVAC units in relation to residential properties? Is that a crazy kind of approach, or is that something that could be considered? You say the other stuff is more, technical. This is pretty basic in that sense. I mean, but I don't know if you ever go that specific with something like that. You say you don't.
Mr. Ward.
Again, through Your Worship to the delegate, we've certainly had these discussions over zoning interpretation. The subject matter that you're looking at falls against the most applicable or relevant provision of the bylaw. The bylaw does not get into distinguish the type of HVAC equipment that might then have its own corresponding requirements. It does so on a more general basis. It's pretty difficult for the bylaw to get into very specifics as to which HVAC equipment goes where and to what extent might it be regulated. It simply recognizes a principle that these elements serve a utility purpose, and there's far more to consider when determining their placement than the bylaw should be attempting to regulate.
Right.
Okay, but I mean, I guess just before something like that is dropped down on residents, like if it's being placed beside a residential property, maybe there needs to be some specific thing that says, that the size element comes into effect, or I mean, as I said, that anyone who sees that will realize that it's going to be impactful. So
okay.
I just,
Mr. Lefebvre, we've got a busy agenda tonight. I'm going to ask Councillor Sherwood to share her thoughts. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. Mr. Lefebvre, thank you very much this evening for delegating to us. I can feel your frustration, and it's very upsetting that your neighbor hasn't really done a very neighborly thing. In my opinion, it seems more like a neighborly dispute. Staff is clearly letting us know that even though your ask is for council to ask that the unit be moved, we have no authority to do that. So unfortunately, it seems to be now more of a neighborly dispute that we can't be directly involved with, other than maybe looking at our zoning bylaw in the future. I would hope that now, tonight, with more information that you have, you could approach them and maybe discuss those types of sound barriers that Mr. Ewald had maybe suggested about putting up some sound barriers around that unit. But it is very unfortunate that they were very disrespectful to their neighbors, and unfortunately it's already done, but it's out of the hands of council to do that direction. I hope you can come to a resolution.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And one more thought, Mr. Lefebvre, the manufacture of HVAC units, there would be some sort of oversight, probably by Canadian Standards Association or somebody like that. There definitely would have been some sort of sound, measuring required for that unit to be approved to be installed there. So I'd be very interested to hear how your discussion with the Ministry of the Environment goes. And I think the solution is sound attenuation barriers of some sort there. And I hope that you can coordinate that, and that the church will be helpful with solving that problem with you. But we thank you for, I know you've aired your concern to us tonight. We've heard it all. We're sympathetic to it. And we, as Councillor Peters mentioned, I think we need to be looking at sound issues with respect to machinery like this within our bylaws going forward. So thank you for bringing that up to our attention, and we will look into that definitely. But thank you for your time tonight, and I'm sorry we don't have a resolution for you, but I hope the church will be kind and helpful in your discussion with them. Thank you.
All right.
All the best.
Bye.
All right, moving on in our agenda tonight, we have Randy Narine of the Choices Youth Shelter. Mr. Narine, welcome.
I'm trying to get out of here.
Actually, my name's Brian Scott. I'm the Vice Chair of Choices Youth Shelter.
Oh.
Randy cannot be with you tonight. He's working. So
hi, Brian. How are you?
He asked me a couple of hours ago to step in, so please bear with me, and I will speak. So I am. Thank you for letting us join, Mayor Brown and councillors. I'm here to talk about the Dufferin Men's Shelter that I'm sure a lot of you have already heard about. So we've taken on this initiative to create a supportive resource within Dufferin County that offers men experiencing homelessness and alternative living on the streets, and support them in their transition to stable housing. There is no other program like this of this kind in the area that serves this population. Currently, the shelter is set up under the umbrella of the Dufferin Youth Shelter, known as Choices. And this allows the shelter to take advantage of Choices' charitable tax status. It capitalizes on the expertise of our shelter manager and qualified staff to operate both entities. The shelter also benefits from the expertise of SHIP, which is Services and Housing in the Province, and they act in an administrative and advisory capacity for Choices. SHIP is a nationally recognized expert in the field of housing insecurity and homelessness, and they are providing us with developing a comprehensive operational plan, and they've been instrumental in getting us up and running. In fact, we welcomed our first residents to the shelter this past Friday. We received seed money for the shelter from an anonymous private donor to get us up and going, but that money is not going to last us very long. To keep us operational, we are going to need a financial commitment of around $300,000 to $350,000 annually to keep it going. The shelter is in its infancy. We are currently in a temporary location until mid-October, and there is much to put in place to create a sustainable operation. And without that sustainable funding, we cannot remain open. So we are asking you to please consider supporting us in this important initiative. There are many ways we can do it. At the very least, we're hoping that we could secure 6 months prorated funding to get us up and running and let us investigate our other sources of income, such as through CMHC the County of Dufferin, and corporate and private donations. We're sure that together we can all make this happen, and we thank you for your time and consideration in this initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. So what we've learned on the homelessness committee is that there are other examples and models that have successfully worked out in the province. The one that I'm thinking of is in Aurelia. They call it the Lighthouse there. They did get seed money through CMHC, which has a program for affordable housing, which includes emergency shelter housing. And with that money, they hired a fundraising coordinator, a professional fundraiser, who then went on to raise and apply for grants both with government agencies and also found money through foundations and private donors. And so I think following that model, we need to get choices some temporary funding, as you've asked for, while the bigger sustainable funding can be discovered and accessed. So I hope that we can do that, and it's my intention later on tonight to give a notice of motion at meeting for some emergency funding for this initiative that Choices have, sort of a one-time help while our committee and Choices work together to find those sustainable buckets of money that are out there. Councillor Sherwood, Councillor Post, and Councillor Andrews. Councillor Sherwood, go ahead.
You're muted, Councillor Sherwood.
Thank you, Councillor Post. Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Scott. Thank you very much for coming on tonight and telling us the great things that are happening for the men's shelter. The middle of October is going to be fastly coming and approaching us, so I know that your desire for funding is kind of now. So you mentioned a 6-month operating. Could you actually give me a dollar figure, an amount? What is your financial ask of us tonight in dollars?
Certainly. We are, so if it would be 350 prorated, I believe that's around $175,000 for 6 months.
And just to follow up, Worship, one more question. Are you going to be also asking for county for the same amount? That's all in the planning. So we'll be going to county and CMHC to create an operational plan that will keep us sustainable. Okay, so for now, Council, your ask for us is 175,000, which should cover 6 months of operations. That is correct. Thank you.
Before I go to Councillor Post, Mr. Scott, if you could just confirm that 350, does that, I know that the County of Dufferin does provide per diem support. I presume that 350 does not include the per diem support that Dufferin County would provide. Is that correct?
I don't believe it does.
That's just expenses. That's not. Yeah, I saw Mr. Byers is on the line here. Mr. Byers, are you able to comment on that? *6, I think, if you're just calling in, Mr. Byers.
Hello, Mr. Brown. It's Randy Byers. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry. I would align my thoughts with Brian Scott at this point. We're still in the planning stages for that.
Right. But the 350 annual expense is just expense. There's no revenue in that.
That is correct.
So, so the money that you would receive from Dufferin County as units of service or whatever you call it for per diems for inhabitants of the shelter would be come off of that 350 ask, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. That's all I wanted to clarify. Okay, Councillor Post. And then
thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Brian, for that presentation. Just a couple of questions, and the first one, I guess, is to Mr. Scott. You had mentioned that you're in a temporary location right now until October. So what does that mean going forward? Do you have a permanent location already established? As you're here asking for some funding help, I'm just wondering where you're going to be putting that money, and is there a permanent location? And my second question, just before you answer that, Mr. Scott, is actually to you, Mr. Mayor, which is with the Men's Homelessness Committee that you've got going right now and the work that you guys have already been doing, does this align with the strategy of working with Choices? I just don't want to see us duplicating services and trying to find funding for multiple different projects if there's going to be any duplication. So those were my two questions. Thank you.
Well, if I could answer, as we were getting the homelessness committee underway, the very happy surprise to hear that Choices had taken the bold move to start the men's shelter. We were at the beginning, we were unaware of their efforts in that area, but as we understood them, I think our initial thoughts were to support Choices in the immediate timeline, certainly probably till next spring, and to try and provide and find funding to get them to that point, while, as I mentioned earlier, the bigger sustainable funding gets worked out. And so I think our committee is committed in the short term to support Choices and to hopefully provide a longer term home for men's homelessness in southern Dufferin County and in Orangeville. So that's my response, Councillor Post. Is there another question you had, or did that cover it?
I think that covers it from your side. Now it's just to Mr. Scott for where is the homelessness shelter going to be located?
Sure, thank you, Mayor Brown. So we do not have a permanent location. Choices had a space that was sitting empty, and our lease was running out. So we took it upon ourselves to utilize that space right away instead of having sitting empty. So we are in the process right now of looking for another space.
Can I add one more follow-up, if I could?
Sure.
I apologize. You just mentioned that you have your first guests who have arrived in the shelter at this point, and if we're looking at only being there for a month, is there a plan or strategy in place for those residents that are there right now in the interim, or are you hoping that you'll have a location secured and opened by the time your time there is up? I just concerned about the emergency piece in between, right?
Totally agree. So we are working with SHIP specifically. They are experts in the area of homelessness, and they have potential access to locations in the short term. So we are working with them while we find a spot that will be more permanent for us. So we're doing everything that we can to meet the middle of October deadline.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Councillor Andrews and then Councillor McIntosh. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I want to just compliment Councillor Post for her questions, bang on with the issues that we're facing here. And Mr. Scott, thank you so much for being a part of tonight's presentation. For those of us that sit on the committee with myself, the mayor, as well as Councillor Sherwood and others in our community, it is a rude awakening for those of us who have noticed, but also are educated on what's going on. And I truly have to commend Choices for stepping up at this point. I feel that it's very important for those that may be watching, those that may end up at some point, maybe even looking at this particular council meeting at a future date. You did mention about the anonymous donor who has helped for the short term, and I know the mayor has indicated that he'll be putting forth a motion, which I will definitely be supporting a little bit later this evening. But I'm hoping that there are others in the community that can also step up. We have heard the plight of those in our community who, of course, in many cases of no fault of their own, find themselves where they are. But I feel compelled to, in this particular forum, to ensure that maybe others in our community who have the means, who may be able to step up and provide some support as well. How they do that, be that anonymously, that may be the case, but I think it's imperative that we have members of our community that can provide some support to this particular cause and others. But this is one that really has struck a chord with me, and that's one of the reasons that I felt compelled to share my thoughts. But again, Mr. Scott, thank you for your point. And the only other thing that I needed some clarification on, and in fact, it was for the most part identified in your response to Councillor Post, which was in fact the facility and the costing for that. and you've outlined in general terms what the expense would be for approximately a 6-month period. So I appreciate that response. Thank you.
Great. Deputy Mayor McIntosh and then Councillor Taylor. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to congratulate the committee and Brian on Mr. Scott on this initiative. I think it's a great initiative. I just wondered, well, I'm suggesting too that the county gets more involved in this, either financially or some other way. It almost falls under the county umbrella. I know it's not exactly, something the county would deal with, but I do think definitely for funding, we should be going to the county and trying to get some funding off them as well. So just a suggestion. And with two of us sitting on county council that would probably support it, it probably has a pretty good chance of getting some funding.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Taylor.
As the Deputy Mayor and I are of like minds, this is one of those issues that you feel funny about turning down if that's what you are going to do. But I do, and I think it's through my ignorance of how the system should be working here. But this, in my view, isn't necessarily an Orangeville thing. This would be a county thing, and the two county reps are on this call. I'd feel more comfortable if we approached the county and went through those avenues first. It's just my take. I don't have an issue with what we're doing, and I think it's a benevolent cause and all of those great things. I'm just not sure this is an Orangeville piece.
Well, I again, sitting on the committee, I think, primarily it is an Orangeville piece more than the county, because those who have been involved in this for several years have told me that the need has not been met. So we're stepping up to create and fund the need. And I agree with you, Councillor Taylor. We need to ask the county and what Deputy Mayor said. So I would hope we maybe can split that ask between the county and in the town. But I will be introducing a notice of motion at meeting to be voted on next meeting, so that we can have a more fulsome report on that expenses and understand where we're going with that. But yeah, Councillor Taylor, go ahead.
If I may, and again, trying to be as sensitive as I can, I'm not looking to take anyone on here this evening. I just hope in the 2 weeks prior to when we review your notice of motion that those discussions can be had, or at least there'll be a path towards it. They should be contributing as well and understand the urgency of the matter.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Thank you, Your Worship.
We will, Deputy Mayor and I will be taking it. We do have some sympathetic voices on County Council on this matter already, and I think we will be successful if we do take a motion to County Council.
I would encourage all my council mates to contact Warden White as well and make sure that they're aware of your position. I'm sorry to interrupt, Your Worship.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Scott, I appreciate that. Councillors, any further comments before we let Mr. Scott go? I want to thank him and thank Mr. Narayan for, again, what I would call a bold initiative that was needed, and you're filling a need here. So we appreciate all the hard work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brown and councillors. Good night.
All the best. Okay, next item on our agenda, 11.4. We've got Allison Shield, General Manager of the Orangeville BIA, looking for support on sidewalk decals. Ms. Shield.
Good evening, Mayor Brown and members of council. I'm not going to take up much of your time tonight at all. I'm just here to address any questions or concerns you may have concerning our request and the sign variance application to install the Thanks for Shopping local decals on the downtown sidewalks. And I can share some information on the screen if you like, if you need me to.
Yeah, I think the public would like to see what you're proposing. If you wouldn't mind taking a couple of minutes to show us.
Yes, absolutely. Do I have controls to do that?
I think you can share your screen, I believe. Mr. Bonato, is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, the delegate should be able to share the screen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you see the decal?
Yes, we can. We can.
Okay, perfect. So that's an image that we would like to share. As you can see, it's just to thank our community for shopping local, for supporting downtown businesses and all really local businesses during the pandemic. The support that local businesses have had from our community during the COVID-19 crisis has been exceptional. And I think our local businesses recognize that and just want to make a kind of a declaration of thanks.
Okay.
If you'd like, I can share the locations that have been identified. This is information about the actual decal material. It is a non-slip material that's used by large businesses like Canadian Tire and Tim Hortons outside of their businesses to control lineups and traffic, pedestrian traffic during the pandemic. And here's the locations that have been identified by the BIA and have been approved kind of in principle with the Public Works Department.
Okay, very good. I've got some hands up here, Councillor Andrews and then Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. Shield, for your presentation and the information that you have shared. I am certainly in agreement with this. My curiosity is based on maybe going one step further, and I'm not sure if this was even discussed, but the idea of either a decal that would be put on a door. You know, when you have patrons and maybe going from business to business, it could be at the exit point where somebody's cashing out. That's one thing that I'm very proud of, is supporting our local businesses. And I think that, you know, the business owners themselves, that might be another way of expressing it verbally, or at least in this case, visually. So just looking maybe for your comment on that.
And so through you, Mayor Brown, to Councillor Andrews, would that be in addition to the sidewalk decals?
Yes, I just thought that it might be something that might have been considered, because again, you know, a window decal, you know, I know we may be sensitive to be that visual pollution that might be out there, but you know, it'd be a nice gesture. You know, when you grab the handle, you know, you see it right there, and it might be just a thought to consider.
Yes, absolutely. That is something you consider. We can consider. We did that suggestion was made as a suggestion instead of the sidewalk decals. And our concern was because there's so much visual clutter on a lot of the windows, you know, with businesses trying to display goods with, you know, posters about community, you know, happenings and that kind of thing, that it might just get a bit lost. And we figured the sidewalks was the one place that was not cluttered with things. And these would only be, you know, like I think there's going to be 25 in total downtown. So it's not going to be, there's not going to be visual clutter on the sidewalks with them. But there is something that we can look into, something small and a vinyl cling that we can look at for sure.
I understand there's some priorities from a public health perspective that may end up issuing a priority versus you know, having something on a window or a door. But you know, I do like the idea of the sidewalk decal. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Worship. I think it's a great idea. Just a suggestion, whenever you do a press release or anything like that, could you really stress that it's non-slip? Because people seem to see these things, and next thing you know, on social media, it gets out of hand. So if you could just stress that they are non-slip, just make things a little smoother. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem.
All right. Councillors, any other comments on this? We'll be voting on a variance later on in the meeting. All right, Ms. Shields, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. All right, moving on to 11.5, Mr. Brennan and his senior staff. Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, members of council, I am pleased with the assistance of our general managers to present the accomplishments of 2020. Our Orangeville Forward strategic plan. As you're aware, in July of 2017, this strategic plan, Orangeville Forward, was approved by council. It's a 5-year plan. You would have received an update in 2020 for the accomplishments of 2018 to 2019. And tonight we're going to provide you an update with the accomplishments of 2020. Just as a quick reminder, the Orangeville strategic plan has 5 areas, key areas of focus: municipal services, strong governance, economic vitality, community stewardship, and sustainable infrastructure. I will now pass it over to our general managers, starting with Andrew McKinney, to start an overview of the accomplishments in each area.
Thank you for the opportunity to start with municipal services. In every key area, there are projects and accomplishments from all the divisions, and there will just be a few highlights for each of them. The municipal service area is focused on customer service, striving to be effective and efficient in service delivery, and respecting both the cost as well as the impact municipal services have on the community. And while this should always be true, I believe in 2020, this was truer than ever. Municipal service delivery can be a bit like a clock. As long as everything runs smoothly, it might go unnoticed. But in 2020, parts of the clock suddenly needed to stop. It was an unprecedented year of change and a year without a playbook, so we had to build one. Countless hours went into planning and replanning across all divisions to keep things moving, constantly seeking to provide a balance between the anchors of municipal services, public health directors, and the information that was changing so quickly. Recreation programs being canceled and relaunching, libraries closing, changing their models and adjusting the program, and the safety of public spaces being questioned and new safety measures being implemented. The speed with which the town adapted in an ever-changing environment was in and of itself an accomplishment. Town staff banded together to plan how we can best continue to serve the community and provide the support it needs in a difficult time while being vigilant about health and safety. We kept pushing that bar to ensure that services were accessible and available as quickly as possible, offering new services in new ways and thinking outside the box. Digital transformation was a linchpin in that adaptation. Next slide, sorry. And due to Council's previous investments, in 2020, we launched a new website and app, increased applications on Data Orangeville, brought forward a smart city framework, and implemented new software like agenda management and so much more. In 2020, we collectively pushed the digital transformation agenda forward significantly. COVID-19 has underpinned and accelerated the need for digital transformation in government, and that leads us to strong governance. Next slide, please. Anchored in financial responsibility, enhanced communications, transparent and fair decision-making processes, and positive relationships with other governments in the private sector, in 2020, Council acted quickly to offer relief related to the pandemic. Communication was enhanced through a number of new initiatives. We worked actively with other local governments, municipalities, public health, and the county. We actively pursued grant funding. And recognizing financial responsibility continued to be a top priority of Council from the planning sessions. We, led by the Treasurer, have continued to move our budgeting process forwards, more towards a performance-based budgeting, and implemented new tools like revolving line of credit and focused on assessment-based loss mitigation. This next slide will symbolize the town's commitment to better communications, providing information that is easy to understand and communicated in a timely way. The town has received international recognition for excellence in communication for both the pandemic recovery plan and the budget. Judged on quality, content, and presentation, this represents the work of the entire management team. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKinney. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Economic vitality, certainly in 2020 was a very challenging year, but a lot of successes through as Ms. McKinney highlighted the pandemic. The pandemic goes on, but it's about attracting and retaining expanding business, fostering entrepreneurship, stimulating tourism and culture development, and further workforce development within the community. In 2020, we worked very hard to get the property across the street from Town Hall, 82, 86, and 90 Broadway, and we came up with options that we're pursuing this year. We did a COVID business survey and assistance. I think you can wrap up this slide by talking about all the business support, collaboration, and drivers that were behind things that were going on in the business community, and we shared and collaborated with the business community and worked with things like a digital Main Street reintroduction, outdoor boulevard cafes, pub operations, those kinds of things, back up and running. The new tourism strategy that we completed in 2020, and we continued on a town official plan update, which is ongoing. The virtual economic outlook breakfast was very, very successful. A wonderful response from the business community, and the virtual outlook really worked out really well in a pandemic year. We had 28 workshops. We had educated over 745 entrepreneurs. Great feedback. We finished the new 4-season visitor guide, updated the walking tour booklet, the public art booklet, and the 8 projects in the art side, where we did 4 beautiful murals at the Green Rink in Alder, and we continue to do that, and we'll complete that in 21. And we did the 4 utility boxes that were extremely beautiful to look at throughout the municipality and added to our inventory. On to community stewardship, which is certainly something that's dear to everybody's heart. The community stewardship talks about safe and protected in our community, active and healthy, engaged and involved in all sectors and throughout the public, and champions of the environment is something we want to be known for and benchmark for. As we know, in 2020, we did the transition. The corporation did the transition with OPP and the police facility renovations. We did the fire station location, and we acquired property for the fire station, and this will be developed in the future. We introduced a lot of programs in recreation and library, both virtual as well as physical, in terms of some of the things we had to do, and had to, dare I use the word, pivot throughout the whole year in trying to introduce programs and services. Doing things that are a little special, like the concert drive-in series and the summer youth series that launched new programs, the Santa Claus neighborhood parades, the holiday lights extravaganza, and those kinds of things to keep things moving, and programs offered throughout the municipality. Also in 2020, we did complete and open the Harvey Curry Every Kids Park. There's $1 million invested in that project, and it's a very, very well used structure and facility. The new Recreation and Parks Master Plan was completed that we're now working with. The COVID Community Recognition Awards was very successful, and a lot of community groups that were involved in the COVID programs and services that were happening in the community. The new municipal tree canopy policy that we adopted in 2020, and now we work towards, you'll see more in 21 about that. And of course, we continue with the Emerald Ash Borer replacement that's ongoing, the Backyard Inn trial program that's new and innovative for our municipality. And of course, I'll conclude with our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee that we launched in 2020, and it's a very active committee now in 21, and certainly will go on in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Osmond. The last of the 5 key areas of the strategic plan is sustainable infrastructure. Orangeville Forward states that infrastructure will become sustainable through the well-planned management of town assets and systems that keep people moving and the town functional. To accomplish this, we must maintain our current assets, plan for growth, support innovation, and provide systems that keep people moving. Now, the next 3 slides provide examples of projects and initiatives that support the goals of sustainable infrastructure. While it's not an exhaustive list of what was accomplished in 2020, I will highlight a few of these projects. The Whiteman Fiber Infrastructure Project supports innovation, one of the key goals of sustainable infrastructure. This partnership between the town and Whiteman Telecom will benefit both residents and businesses by providing access to fast, reliable, high-speed internet. As we all know, during the pandemic, with so many people working from home and attending school remotely, reliable high-speed internet is no longer a luxury. It's become a necessity. Other highlights include the reconstruction of Little York and Faulkner Streets, the replacement of the retaining wall at Broadway and Blind Line, and the Broadway Medians project. Next slide, please. The province requires that all municipalities approve an asset management plan for core assets by July 1st, 2022. Following an asset management approach, we'll develop a plan to cost-effectively maintain our current assets. We'll be required to identify the current level of service for roads, bridges, culverts, and our water, wastewater, and stormwater management systems, and determine the cost of maintaining those levels of service. The asset management work has been ongoing for some time and will be accelerated as July 1st, 2022 deadline approaches. Additionally, in 2020, we continued work towards a decision on the location of a new transit transfer station, and to deal with the pandemic, we installed safety barriers and implemented various safety protocols on our transit buses. On September 28, 2020, Council adopted its very first water conservation plan. The objectives of the water conservation plan include delaying the need for increases to water supply capacity and improving cost efficiency for the operation of the waterworks system. By reducing water use and water loss, we would allow ourselves to accommodate additional growth within our existing supply capacity, thereby actively planning for growth. And additionally, to accommodate growth, the work on the class environmental assessment for additional supply capacity continued through 2020. Back to you, Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship and members of Council, 2020 and 2021 have proven to be very challenging times for all. As you just heard from our general managers, even with such challenges, much has been accomplished in 2020 to achieve the goals and objectives of our strategic plan. Such goals and objectives can only be achieved by working together, by working as a team, what I refer to as Team Orangeville. I must stress that this was a brief, high-level overview of all the accomplishments. It's not an inclusive list. More details are included in the strategic plan process report that is on today's agenda. In addition to the achievements noted, I would like to recognize the great work and efforts of all staff as they provide the ongoing day-to-day operations and delivery of services to our residents and customers. I want to acknowledge that you are the backbone of our operations and our organization. Without you, these accomplishments are not possible. I would like to thank Council for your continued support. Again, without such, these accomplishments and advancements would not be possible. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our general managers, Andrew McKinney, Ray Osmond, and Doug Jones, and to our management team, and to all of staff. Your efforts, flexibility, and adaptability are truly appreciated, and I commend you for your excellent work and achievements of 2020. Thank you. Over to you, Council, for any questions or comments.
Mr. Brennan, thank you. And again, thank you to you and your senior staff and all members of staff for really, steering us through a very difficult time. And I think we've come out stronger for the effort and all of the work that went into the last year and a half, and particularly all the successes of 2020. Councillor Andrews, go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And again, I just wanted to echo exactly what you have said and what Mr. Brennan has said about the staff. We have gone through some unprecedented times, the resiliency, the ability of pivoting, of course, that overused word during this pandemic. All I can say from my seat, it has been just a phenomenal effort collectively to see what you have been able to accomplish and how the community has benefited so much. We still have much to do, but I know that from my seat, I couldn't be prouder to be a part of just being one person who has watched how the staff have been able to move this forward, move the community forward in so many different ways. But all I can say is thank you.
Right. Well said. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Okay, I guess we'll move on on our agenda to item 11.6, Mr. Andrew Wildeboer. Mr. Wildeboer, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Brown, Deputy Mayor, councillors. I'm here in reference to the item on your agenda 12.8 as it applies to 670 to 690, the recommendation to remove a holding symbol as well as a demolition permit. I have nothing to say other than I'm in support of it, obviously. I'm Andrew Wildeboer, Sheldon Creek Developments, the developer of the site, but I'm here to offer any comments or questions that council may have when it comes to your agenda.
Very good. Councillors, will we wait until that item comes up in staff reports, and then we'll ask Mr. Wildeboer to hang around and be available to answer questions at that time, if you wouldn't mind. All right, Mr. Wildeboer, thank you. We'll get to that discussion shortly. So let's move on to 12.1. Again, this is the Strategic Plan Progress Report, CAO 2021-008. It's a recommendation that the report, the Strategic Plan Progress Report 2021, be received. May I have a motion to receive the report? Councillor Peters, second by Councillor Sherwood. Any comments, councillors? All in favor?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to 12.2, this is the previously discussed sign variance application from the Orangeville BIA, CPS 2021-068, a recommendation that this report regarding the sign variance application Orangeville BIA be received, and the council grant a variance to the sign bylaw 28-2013 as amended to permit the placement by the Orangeville BIA of 25 sidewalk decals on public property measuring 25 inches in diameter in the following locations, conditional upon obtaining a road occupancy permit. Those locations are listed below. Can we have a motion to approve this sign variance? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. Any further discussion, councillors? Councillor Sherwood, go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship. I just wanted to reiterate what we had discussed earlier, that the BIA task force has been very mindful on making sure that the decals are slip resistant, so that people don't have to be very fearful of slipping and falling on the sidewalk. And I also I think this is a great initiative for the town to support this. And yeah, that's what I'm hoping that council will approve this.
Oh, okay. If I could ask Ms. Shield one more question, what's the life expectancy of these decals, Ms. Shield?
To be honest with you, I'm not really sure at this point. We were hoping to get them done earlier in the summer. So if they didn't make it through the winter, that would be okay. We could start fresh again in the spring. This is really just a test run, and this is the minimum amount that we could print. So we can't even do a smaller run of them. This is the minimum. 25 is minimum. So we're willing to give it a risk and see if they make it through the winter. And then next year, once the new sidewalks are in place, if council likes the way they look, then we can look at doing them again next year. But we will remove them if they start looking, unpleasant. Then we will remove them immediately. The ones that aren't looking good.
That's what I was hoping to get, some sort of a verbal approval from you that if they do start to look unsightly, that they would be removed.
Absolutely, we don't want them to look. We don't want them to be in poor condition either, because that doesn't look good on us. So they will definitely be removed as and when they need to be.
Correct. Councillor Sherwood, you have your hand
Sorry,
up.
I had one other thing to say, but I was starting to choke, so I had to leave for a second. This is kind of a good opportunity for us. If we can get these approved and installed, likely by next month, we'll be able to go through each season. And then with the sidewalks coming up, being torn up next fall, we've been through each season to see how they wear and tear and whether they're effective. And then we know that they're going to be removed when the sidewalks are removed next fall anyway.
That's right. And again, from my perspective, I would say this is a one-off for me. This is a very unusual circumstances, the COVID, and I would not be voting again in the future for this to be a regular occurrence. I just wanted to make that point clear. But I am supportive of this on a temporary basis to show our support to the community for helping and supporting our local businesses. Okay, so councillors, can we have I guess we did have a motion already on this. All in favor?
Yes.
Very good. All right, well, we're looking forward to this, Ms. Shield. I hope you can roll it out as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
All the best. All right, on to 12.3. This is a procurement activities report for 2020. It's CPS 2021-062. and the recommendation that this report regarding the town's procurement activities for 2020 be received. May I have a motion to receive this report, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Post. Any comments, councillors, on the report, which is quite extensive? People can read it and see how busy our town staff is on these items. Ms. McKinney, you wish to weigh in here at all? No? Okay, very good. All right.
No, just available for questions.
All right. Well, I just, it's a comprehensive list of things. Obviously, town staff has been very busy with procurement, and thank you for the report. All right, so we have a motion. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to 12.4. This is the proposed 2022 council meeting schedule, CPS 2021-056. A recommendation that report, the 2022 council meeting schedule, be received, and the council adopt the 2021 council meeting schedule amendments as outlined in that report. And the council adopt the 2022 council meeting schedule as outlined in that report. May I have a motion for this, please? Councillor Peters, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Any comments or questions, councillors? Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I'm sure that the rest of you must feel the same as me. I'm quite anxious to get back in the council chambers along with my fellow councillors and staff. So perhaps, Mr. Brennan, you could let us know what is the plans for us getting back in the council chambers.
Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Sherwood and the rest of council. Staff are working on developing a hybrid model of technology in council chambers that would allow members of council and staff and residents, for that matter, to participate in a hybrid model. So some from home, some from other locations, and some in the council chambers. At this point, we are waiting on parts. Like many industries and supply chain issues, we are facing some with our projects. And we also must remember that we are still under a Section 22 order from Public Health of wearing masks and social distance, even in our buildings and facilities. So at this time, it would still be a challenge, even if we had the systems up and running, to run a full outright in-place council meeting, allowing members of the public to come in. So at this time, we're hoping that later in the fall that all of the supply issues and supply chain issues would be completed or over, and that we would have the council chambers up and running. But I think at that stage, we will still need to have a discussion with council, looking at the increased numbers and the increased positivity rate with the new variants. And I think we really will have to discuss, does council really want to sit together in the council chambers with such activities going on around us if they stay the same?
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Okay, I'm sorry, did we get a motion there? We did, didn't we? All in favor? Councillor Andrews? Yeah, you were frozen there for a sec. Okay, very good. Moving on to 12.5, this is the budget 2022 schedule and direction, CPS 2021-064. Recommendation that report CPS 2021-064 dated September 13th, 2021, and the budget 2022 schedule and direction be received. And the council endorse receiving a 5-year budget outlook for operating budget and a 10-year budget outlook for capital budget deliberation. And the council approved maintaining of the cost of living allowance equivalent to the same level as 2020 of 2% as a guideline to report a budget for non-union staff salary and benefits in the proposed 2022 budget. May you have a motion for this, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Any comments, councillors? Councillor Andrews, go ahead, sir. And then Councillor Taylor. Councillor Andrews, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. This is a question to Madam Treasurer. Again, thank you for your detailed report at this time. I found it interesting as for the MPAC observation that you had. And I'm wondering if you might be able to, in just a very short period of time, provide just a little bit of clarity to what might be coming over the horizon, if that's possible at this time.
Madam Treasurer.
Through you to Councillor Andrews, and thank you very much for that question. So the update is essentially the same as last year's budget. So the province decided, in order to provide some relief to members of public, the reassessment cycle was essentially brought to a freeze. So 2021, we didn't see any additional reassessment, and that will continue into 2022. Given that the reassessment cycle is every 4 years, and with the first 2 years being frozen, my prediction, and it remains to be a prediction at this point, is that we may play catch up in 2023 and 24.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Taylor.
Maybe it's not a question, or maybe I'm just looking for affirmation from my favorite treasurer, but I do read through the CPI, the inflation and whatnot. Everything that I see in my own personal world says that we're in for a bit of a rough ride just because of the environment that we're in with mass inflation. I'm curious, like the 2%, I assume we'll have discussions about that as we go. And for once, the chief politician is leaning the other way, and that is, I worry that with the war on talent that we're having in the municipal sector, that 2% in this environment is going to create issues for us. In other words, we'll lose people. So I guess I'm just hoping that we might look and reevaluate, and I assume that you will, Nandini, but maybe that rate might have to be adjusted north.
Through your worship to Councillor Taylor, since there's no question in there, again, the report is.
I guess I'm looking for affirmation. I'm sorry. Like, I assume that you'll look at that. This isn't in stone that you're saying it's 2%. This is a running document that you're going to review and change based on the factors that we would have in front of us at that time.
Absolutely. So the inflation, as you have indicated, and I've provided some numbers for you. The reason I recommended 2% because it stays pretty much in line with what I have provided to you last year, and I have a good handle on what that will look financially. In terms of whether council would like to recommend anything north of that percentage, is something that council has to provide me some direction with. In terms of whether we can go back and revisit that percentage number, there is a timeline in terms of when we have to produce the document in terms of our budget document. So I'm hoping that with this report to you today, and between now until the tabling of the budget, if council would like to revisit this conversation, there will be some opportunities.
Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship, I just want to remind my fellow councillors that last year we approved a 5-year 2% increase in the Treasurer's report. So it was already, if you read back on your report, it was clear that staff had asked for us to give CPI adjustments at 2% for 5 years. And I did try and bring it up at the time and was voted down. So I would not be in favor of any more than 2%. I think 2% is very adequate, considering last year when the treasurer came, it was a negative, which meant we would have clawed back staff's salary, which I wouldn't be in support of. But I do want to make you aware, we approved 2% for the next 5 years.
Ms. Syed.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Sherwood. So Councillor Sherwood, when we present multi-year budget to Council for deliberation and approval, the first year is actually the year that Council approves. The remainder of the year, whether the remainder 4 years for operating and 9 for capital, those are essentially approved in principle. And that means Council will absolutely have an opportunity again to revisit those numbers. So
thanks for clarification, Ms. Syed.
yes, I just wanted to make sure that I clarified this for you, for the rest of council and the listening public.
Because the report does make it look like we've approved 2% for 5 years, but I understand you're right in principle.
Very good. Okay, we did have a motion on this. All in favor? Okay, that was passed unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Syed. All right, moving on to 12.6. This is some Integrity Commissioner costs that is under CPS 2021-065. Recommendation that the report CPS 2021-065 Integrity Commissioner costs be received. This is the cost associated with 2 complaints against myself, and they're indicated in the agenda. Can we have a motion to receive this report, please? Councillor Post, second by Councillor Sherwood. Any comments, councillors? Hearing none. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to 12.7. This is 15 to 17 York Street. That's a request for demolition on a municipal heritage register property. The recommendation is that report INS 2021-048, 15 to 17 York Street, demolition on a municipal heritage register property be received. And the council not oppose the demolition of 1-story rear portion of the existing dwelling on the property. May we have a motion to approve this, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Peters. Any questions or comments, councillors? It seems like a very nice renovation on an existing property. It seems it's all in order to me. All right, all in favor? Very good, thank you. All right, moving on to 12.8. This is 670, 690 Broadway. I'll read the recommendation. This is RZH 2021-01 and RD-2021-2 and RD-2021-03 and INS 2021-049. The recommendation that those reports be received and that the removal of the holding symbol on the application RZH 2021-01 be approved, and the council pass a bylaw to remove the holding symbol on the lands legally described as Parts 1 and 2, Plan 7R6535, part of Lot 5, Concession C, Geographic Township of East Garifraxa, Town of Orangeville, County of Dufferin, municipally known as 670 and 690 Broadway, and the council allocate water and sewage treatment services for the proposed 33 townhouse units, and that residential demolition applications be approved subject to the following conditions. 1, that site plan application SPA 2021-12 be approved and the site plan agreement be executed prior to the issuance of any demolition permits. 2, that the applicant construct and substantially complete the new buildings, to be erected on the subject property no later than 2 years from the date of issuance of the demolition permit. 3, that existing wells be decommissioned to the satisfaction of the town of Orangeville in accordance with Regulation RRO 190, Regulation 903, and that 4, a construction waste management plan be implemented by the developer. Can we have a motion on this, please? Councillor Peters, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All right, so I'm sure we've got some conversation on this item. Councillor Sherwood, go right ahead.
Yes, Your Worship. Earlier we were introduced to Mr. Wildeborough that I believe said was representing Sheldon Wood or Sheldonville Developments. Mm-hmm. If I read the report here, it's making reference to the previous applicant being a number company and Habitat for Humanity. I'm assuming then that we have a new developer here and that those people are no longer involved. So am I correct in saying that there is absolutely no relationship with the Habitat for Humanity? In other words, there is no developing based on that with that organization?
Larissa. Russell, would you weigh in, please, on this? Thank you.
Through your worship to Councillor Sherwood, yes, that is correct. The plans have evolved and Habitat Humanity is no longer involved in this project. It is now under the ownership of Sheldon Creek.
So there is no Habitat for Humanity units. As I see, the units have gone from 40 to 33. That's obviously to accommodate all the other asks that we had, but none of those are designated for Habitat for Humanity because we now have a new developer, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, the only conversation that I wanted to bring up was about the tree issue, and we, you know, again, reading through the report and reading through the previous reports, it was, you know, quite clear that what has happened there was, you know, what needed to happen according to the plan, and that was that an arborist was to go through and look at the trees, and unfortunately found many of them to be in ill health, and recommended that all of the trees be removed as a result. I know I've spoken to other councillors. We did have the same recollection that we were going to try and save some of those trees if possible, because the residents on Dinnick were concerned about loss of screening of this new development. So, Mr. Ward, just for the sake of the public, I'm wondering if you could just comment on the tree replacement program, perhaps, and specifically on the developer's land, but also on the buffer between Dinnick properties and the new development, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, Your Worship, thank you, and through you to the rest of council. So obviously with respect to the concerns about the tree removal on the property that have evolved, we've had some conversation with the developer about enhancing the planting towards the southern extent of the site. It's more so focused in the segment of land that's owned by the town immediately adjacent to the residential properties. We understand there were requests perhaps to look at larger trees planting in that location. However, in discussing this with the developer's arborist and landscape architect team, it was quickly evident that planting larger trees is more of a transplant operation than a planting operation, and that comes with it some very real challenges with survival rates and sort of growth going into stagnation and likelihood of dying off in actually a longer period of time. So it's just not practical to plant larger trees. Planting, I guess, smaller trees more in alignment with our tree canopy policy is the prudent way to go. You have much better uptake and survival rates and faster growth that would actually catch up to or even surpass that of larger trees being transplanted in a similar time frame. So with that said, the developer has been working cooperatively with us. They are producing an updated landscape plan as part of their site plan approval process that will focus much more robust vegetation planting more in close proximity to the Dinnick properties to address those concerns.
Mr. Ward, what is the width of the town buffer? I seem to remember something like 70 feet, maybe. Is that? Do you remember, or in meters, what that buffer area is?
I believe that's correct, Your Worship. I want to say around 18 to 20 meters.
Okay. And I did speak with CAO Brennan earlier today. There is some talk that there may be a trail potential on that land. Have we developed any sort of planting program yet on the town buffer? Or is it just the site plan of the developer that's been approved as far as landscape plan at this moment?
The landscape, certainly, Your Worship, the landscape plan does include the town-owned segment. That, in fact, is where most of the planting is focused, because obviously when you start to introduce plantings on what would eventually be privately owned lots, there's limited ability to see those plants be maintained or plantings being maintained over the long term once they fall into ownership of private residents. So With that said, it is being focused in the town-owned property. We are working with Parks and Facilities staff and looking at those plans. They've indicated that the planting seems quite satisfactory, and we'll continue to review that with them as we go forward.
So again, this would be my personal ask. I know a number of the other councillors are, I think, aligned with this. And we'll ask Mr. Wildeboer, who's still on the line, if we can try and talk to arborists and try and maximize the size of the new trees that are being planted to whatever sizes makes sense and that will survive going forward. So if we could ask Mr. Wildeboer and town staff to try and maximize those things in this case. Councillor Peters has his hand up. Go ahead, sir.
I have a meeting at 8, so 7.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I think, we were all taken aback when one day we woke up and that buffer had been cleared, 99%. I understand the piece about the arborist report and the health of the trees and that sort of thing, but I think this reinforces the need for a conversation we've had earlier about tree protection and how developments and the canopy interact with one another. So I guess my question through to Mr. Ward is, to what extent can we maximize the partnership between the developer and the town in that area, and what measure do we have to ensure that it happens? Without mentioning specifics, there have been other developments where a certain number of trees or size of trees have been promised and not delivered, and going back on those is very difficult if there's no mechanism to ensure that it's put in place. So I think I speak for some of my colleagues when I ask what guarantees do we have that we're really going to get as much into that space as we can to recover what was lost.
Mr. Ward.
Sure, through your worship and to Councillor Peters, the site plan application process underway is really our most effective tool to ensure we get the most robust planting scheme that's reasonably acceptable. And through that process, we have the ability to secure for those trees by execution of an agreement with the developer to ensure that planting comes to fruition and introduce some sort of warranty terms and even posting of financial securities to guarantee or assure the survival of those plantings for a certain period of time. That's not untypical from our typical development process we pursue with any site plan development through town. So it is a good, effective tool to implement this. Keeping in mind that with respect to the additional planting in this area, there's other factors we have to consider. This corridor does serve as a drainage channel, and if there is discussion about introducing a trail system through there, we'll have to bring that all together, and we'll do that. We'll have those conversations through the site plan process.
So if I could follow up quickly, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Ward, can you confirm then that the open space buffer is within the limits of the site plan application, or is it strictly what will become the private land, when that's severed?
Through your worship, the open space area is right now under town ownership. It has been coordinated with the site plan submission for this property because it is so intrinsically tied to its development. Earlier on, when they submitted their plans, it was observed that there are some drainage challenges there. There's some topography challenges that sort of need to be brought into integration with the subject lands.
Right. So I guess, sorry, if I could ask it more clearly, does the developer's planting plan extend into that open space in terms of the requisite number and size of trees?
Short answer, yes, it does. That's exactly where the plantings are proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not speaking for the rest of council, but I was absolutely shocked when I seen the utter destruction that was done at that area. I was speechless, to be honest with you. I share Councillor Peters' concern. We got caught once, so we're going to get caught again here. What guarantees are we going to have? I was prepared not to support this tonight. So there's another area to support when the landscaping issue will come up. Is that correct? Mr. Ward?
Through you, your worship, the subject matter is really with respect to the removal of the holding symbol and the conditions attached to it. And they're pretty clearly laid out with respect to provision of servicing. And that's all described in the report that's presented before you. The reality is, however, the landscape matter has emerged as part of this development and is obviously what we are discussing tonight. But I would suggest it's important to note that the site plan, the landscape aspect is not tied to the holding symbol. So I would advise a bit of caution in sort of bringing that matter in as part of your consideration of this holding removal.
Okay. Second question, Mr. Ward. Have they finished taking the trees down? I did have a resident ask about the parkland area to the east. Are they going to be removing those trees as well, or do you know if they've stopped?
Through your worship, I believe they have completed all the tree removal works slated for that site and are just now working through the site plan process to finalize the landscaping and any remaining issues to be addressed through that process.
Okay. And again, I understand what you're saying about the holding symbol. I'm just concerned that we've been, I'm not saying lied to, we weren't lied to, that was what we approved in principle, but it sure wasn't what we thought we were going to get. And I'm just concerned that we're going to have no final approval on the landscape. And I don't know how to go about getting that. But I'd be interested to hear the rest of council's thoughts on that.
Council, any further comments on this matter? Mr. Brennan and then Mr. Taylor. Mr. Brennan.
Your worship, to you and members of council, we have heard you loud and clear, and I'm sure that staff, we will ensure that we have a very robust planting program and plan. I know Mr. Wildeboer was also committed to addressing this issue, and I'm sure that we will find something that is suitable to all as we go forward.
Very good. Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Sherwood.
I guess I don't have anything further to add, Your Worship. I guess I just share the concerns of the rest of council. We've talked to all of those residents along there. I visited the site myself and talked to residents, and I guess in lots of ways I feel like I let them down because that's not what I had anticipated was going to happen. You know, and here we are. So I think the commentary of the Deputy Mayor and of Councillor Peters, and just in the future of what we can do, you know, perhaps the onus is on us to ask further questions. But I must admit, if I was a resident on Dinnick right now, I'm not real happy with what's going on. And you know, I wouldn't put the developer on the spot in any sort of way. That's not fair. But you know, perhaps there's some sort of bridge building that they can do in the interim. You know, and future projects can be thought about as well.
Right. Mr. Wildeboer, you're still on board with us. I'm just wondering if you could weigh in here and provide some context and some commentary, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And to council, yes, I concur with the words of CEO Brennan and the fact that we have had discussion with town planning. Our efforts are to you know, to enhance the property to maybe a better state than it was prior to the development. Obviously, there were some derelict properties and a lot of trees that were worth saving. I did acquire the property midway. You know, in fact, when I was looking at the landscaping drawing and all the trees that had to be removed, I was shocked too that everything had to go. But notwithstanding the need to ensure drainage and all those things were met, and that's why it happened. In fact, today I sent a drawing to both Larissa and to Brandon to show the updated, enhanced landscaping plan that we have, which adds like 450 species of some different shrubs and things like that to make sure that ground cover is well covered, as well as an additional trees that will, you know, and will help every one of those houses that are directly affected by the fact that those trees are gone. So I think that we understand that this is a process. We understand as well that we have to post securities to ensure that we complete the work that we say we're going to do, and the town has the final say before they release the securities back to us to say that the work has been done in a way or in a fashion that is according to the site plan, which we are working together with your staff.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Wildeboer. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I'm just going to repeat what everyone else said. I too was very devastated when I saw the trees removed. I even went back and watched our meetings where we made it very clear to the developer at the time we wanted those trees saved. We were told, and it's right in the recording, that they would be saved. That's why I kind of brought up the fact that there had been a change in ownership, and that maybe you, as in all fairness to you, Mr. Wildeboer, you and you as developer didn't realize that we were given that promise by the previous developer that they were going to save it. So thank you very much for working with everybody. Like I say, we can't get them back now, but whatever you can do to mitigate and make everybody happy is satisfying for me. My concern here, though, is that does this mean that the developer encroached on the town's lands and took our trees down without us providing them direction? Because that area in the OS was our land. So why did they remove them, or did we send resources in to remove them? Mr. Ward.
Through your worship, the removal was done in conjunction with staff review and approval. It was, submitted prior to them wanting to proceed with that work. It was all part of their site plan process. It was done so with town approval.
Okay, thank you.
Remember, councillors, that we had a professional arborist go in there and assess the trees, and unfortunately, many of them were deemed not healthy, and that replanting would be the best long-term result here, and provide the type of shade and aesthetics that the people on Dinnick are going to want in the long term. We recognize in the short term, not so great. Anyway, I think that's what we have to. I think we've done enough talking on this. We've got to move it forward. So,
Your Worship, if
yes.
I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think your commentary is right. I just think it was probably lost in terms of communication, A, with council, and B, with the residents, in particular the back on Dinnick. And maybe that's where the fall down here is. But I agree with your assessment. We had a professional arborist go in, but I think people would have liked to have known as it went along, as opposed to seeing it arrive at the end result.
Okay. We have a motion on the, thank you, Councillor Taylor. We have a motion on the floor to approve this. All in favor? All right. Nobody was opposed. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wildeboer, and we're looking forward to seeing that project. Okay, moving on to 12.9. This is 287A Broadway Recommendation Report RZH 2021-02 and INS 2021-050. It's a recommendation that report for 287A Broadway be received, and that the removal of a holding symbol be approved. And the council pass a bylaw to remove a holding symbol on lands legally described as parts of lots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 16, and 17, Block 1, Registered Plan 237, Town of Orangeville, County of Dufferin, municipally known as 287A Broadway, be received, that we pass that bylaw. Can we have a motion on this, please? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Any further comments? Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Ward. Mr. Ward, I was interested to see this property, but I guess I was a bit surprised. I was kind of thinking that we would see more of them at the same time. That section of Broadway has, looked like it's screaming for redevelopment for quite a while. I was just curious, is there any plans that you can share that might be available for public consumption with the rest of those properties that are there? It is quite frankly an eyesore, and it's one of our most traveled streets.
Through your worship to Councillor Taylor, we have got no immediate plans or pre-submission consultation requests for those properties in that area.
Okay. Any further comments, councillors? All right, all in favor? Thank you. Moving on to 13, correspondence. We've received a number of items of correspondence. I'm going to refer to two of them specifically. That was letters received from Rob Harwood-Jones, Annie Harwood-Jones, and Jane Avruskin regarding an application that's coming up at, this is RZ 2021-02. That's the proposed 9-story condominium. Just want to recognize those in particular. I like those residents are concerned about that particular development and 9 stories. I guess we'll have more. We'll hear more in the near future on that. Could we have a motion to receive the correspondence, please? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, second by Councillor Andrews. Any further comments, councillors, on these correspondence? Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I didn't want to just fly by this quickly. In our correspondence, we've received some correspondence from Anita Isaac regarding her concerns. When we're on the topic of trees tonight, I wanted to acknowledge her letter and concern about 15 Canadian pine trees possibly being destroyed in the fire hall development. I would assume, Mr. Osmond, perhaps you could answer that this is in the real early stages, and that's something you will be taking into consideration when you're proposing, obviously, I don't know the right terminologies. Mr. Osmond, perhaps you can help me with that, but can you take this into consideration when things come towards that future fire hall?
Mr.
Thank you, Bishop. Through to Councillor Sherwood, absolutely. As we move forward with the planning process for the fire hall, we take a look at all the site itself and what we're going to use on that site, what land we would have to develop, and what landscape features will be required on the land, what can stay on the land, and what needs to be enhanced on the property. So that'll be all part of the process, and certainly council will see that as it evolves.
Yeah, because this person is very concerned that, that we have try and take an opportunity to recycle them, retransplant them, relocate them, donate them, especially if they're healthy trees. So I just wanted to acknowledge that from Ms. Isaac. Thank you, Mr. Osmond.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sherwood. All right, councillors. Councillor Post, go right ahead.
Thank you very much. I just didn't want us to fly by this without recognizing and congratulating former Mayor Ryan and wishing her all the best as she moves on. And also congratulating new Mayor Creelman and Deputy Mayor Nix on their appointments at Mono Council. Our neighbors are very lucky to have them serving and have been very lucky to have former Mayor Ryan serving for them as well. So just wanted to wish Mayor Ryan all the best.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Councillor Post, for those words. Also on here is a couple of additional items. The proclamation for Truth and Reconciliation Day, which this year for the first time is a federal holiday on September the 30th. And all of the difficult things that have been learned in the past several months regarding residential schools has been brought home here, and we will be paying tribute and remembering these issues on September 30th, which is not too far down the road. So, okay, on the correspondence, we've had a motion to receive. Can all in favor? All the best. Thank you. And then item 14 is we have a number of committee and board minutes, including the Committee of Adjustment meeting of July the 7th, the Committee of Adjustment meeting of August the 4th, and I think we also have the Men's Homelessness Committee of July 22nd and the Men's Homelessness Committee of August the 12th. Can we have a motion to receive those minutes, please? Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. Any further discussion, comments? No. All in favor? Thank you. Okay. Now, we also have a notice of motion prior to the meeting. This is from Councillors Taylor, Post, and Sherwood, I believe. Does anybody want to just give a little Coles Notes version here? Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So residents have contacted us about trailers parked in driveways. And I brought this up about a year and a half ago, and there was some brief discussion among council. We didn't have a motion, nor did we come to any kind of agreement on it. But at the time, residents parking trailers in streets and in driveways was causing some issues for other residents who didn't have trailers, seeing around them. And, you know, people were kind of concerned about, I guess, the unsightliness of those that aren't in love with trailers being in residential neighbors. So this one in particular had resulted that there was a large trailer parked in a driveway, and the trailer overhung that driveway and was into the street. And it was very difficult to see around that trailer and to pull out of your driveway and do so in a safe manner. So Councillor Sherwood, Councillor Post, and myself got together and we debated at length about what would be a solution to this. And you know, it's a double-edged sword, because there is people who definitely enjoy trailers and, you know, would have a right, I guess, to park in their driveway and load those trailers and be ready to go away for a holiday. But we also must be mindful that there's others in the neighborhood who don't appreciate those things. And so we simply tried to make a small tweak, and that being that if it didn't fit in the driveway, it shouldn't be allowed to be in said driveway. And we gave some examples here, and you can see what those are in Newmarket, Mississauga, and Brampton, who do have regulations in place for different trailers and the sizes and whatnot. And since that time, I understand that our planning department has given some direction as well. And I won't speak for Mr. Ward. Maybe he could explain his take on it. But the three of us thought that this would be a good debate, and whether we've nailed this or not here in this notice of motion, you know, maybe we haven't, but I think the spirit of it is that we should be recognizing that this is a bit of a nuisance for a period of time for a large group of our residents. So anyway, for your consideration, Council.
All right, we have Deputy Mayor McIntosh and then Councillor Peters. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So really what this bylaw is asking, if I'm correct, is just that it doesn't overhang, your vehicle isn't bigger than the driveway. That's fine. I would have thought that was common sense, but I guess things don't always go that way. You might want to include motorhomes as well. You refer to trailers. Recreational vehicles might be a better wording for it, so it would take in motorhomes too. But that's my comments.
Councillor, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to perhaps Mr. Ward. Does the zoning bylaw not already cover vehicles that are parked over the sidewalk or beyond the curb? I guess I'm struggling with what this adds to bylaw enforcement and whether or not those rules already exist for all vehicles.
Mr. Ward.
Through your worship, the zoning bylaw does permit trailer RV parking in driveways. It's not explicit with respect to you know, overhang limitations or things of that nature. I think it's sort of implied that when parking on a driveway, the placement of that parking area would be within the property limits. Having said that, we recognize perhaps as presented in this notice of motion that there are some challenges with that, and I gather council is looking to look at maybe adding a little more detail to this provision.
So if you don't mind, if I could ask it another way, are there no rules right now that for infractions for parking over the sidewalk or beyond the curb?
Through your worship, to Councillor Peters, I'm not certain as to how far the zoning bylaw could go in terms of its enforcement in that capacity, because you're dealing with land use of land, etc. And if the language is not explicit in the zoning bylaw with respect to that, I'm not sure how enforceable that is, sort of extending beyond that language.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. You have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just as point of clarification to Councillor Peters, if I could, in this situation, we did have Bylaw go out, and Bylaw did not have the ability to change that situation. So they asked the residents in a very nice way to rectify the situation because they were, infringing and causing an issue for others and overhanging, but they weren't actually doing anything wrong according to the bylaw, and they couldn't be told what to do. They could be asked what to do because it was the right thing to do, but they could not be told to remove the trailer.
Councillor Peters, you had your hand up again?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if I could follow up, I understand here that the RVs or the trailers are sort of the catalyst for this issue, but would we not want to address any vehicles that are blocking our sidewalks or overhanging the curbs? And why would we restrict it just to motor vehicles? Yeah. If that mechanism is not in place, it should be in place for everything.
You beat me to the punch there, Councillor Peters, because I spoke to a police officer this morning who experienced a pickup truck with the hitch overhanging the sidewalk in a very dangerous situation. If somebody was riding a bicycle at night, or somebody even walking at night might not see the trailer hitch projecting onto the sidewalk. And, he brought that to my attention. So I was going to bring that up, that we can't restrict it to RVs. We need to have any vehicle or any piece of equipment, maybe for that matter, that projects and causes a dangerous condition. So Councillor Taylor, Post and Sherwood, hopefully we could work with Bylaw and our town clerk and get the right wording that protects more than just the trailer situation, that there's more to it than that. So thank you, Councillor Peters, for bringing that up. I agree with you 100% there. All right.
Your Worship.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Sherwood.
Can I ask Mr. Ward then, is it addressed, is our zoning bylaw addressed for, say, if they had a transport in their driveway, like a transport truck with a trailer and stuff? If it was larger, are transports also included in the zoning bylaw?
Through your worship to Councillor Sherwood, yes, transport trucks, etc., are addressed in the bylaw. I don't have the exact provisions in front of me, but I understand there's some time restrictions onto how often or frequent they can be parked in the driveway. But yes, there are separate provisions for trucks parking in the zoning bylaw.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I've also heard complaints of school buses being parked in unsafe conditions, blocking the visibility. Okay, so great. Thank you for bringing this notice of motion. So I'd also like to make another notice of motion at the meeting, which we talked about earlier, and that was for council to consider funding the Choices Youth Shelter men's homelessness shelter, and we'd like to bring a more comprehensive report to council at next meeting for their consideration of the support, financial support for the men's shelter. Any other notices of motion at meeting, councillors?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Weren't we supposed to vote on that other one?
We've left the other one, Your Worship.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got hands up here. Mr. Brennan and then Mr. Ward.
Your Worship, reference the former notice of motion of the driveways and parking, and maybe Mr. Ward was going to raise the same thing. We have concerns about the timelines. I'm not sure where to come up, but staff will have a problem meeting these timelines, and I think a suggestion from Mr. Ward will be forthcoming. Mr. Ward?
Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Yes, and through you to Mayor Brown and members of council, with respect to the January 1st, 2022 deadline, that would be very difficult to achieve. If we're going to look at the zoning bylaw, we have to follow the typical statutory framework for amending the bylaw. And, for something such as this, that's going to include a bit of sort of a background review. Similar to what's already been presented here, we'd want to look at, best practices and, do some homework as to what the issues are and what we should be looking at as part of this. And then most importantly, that would include consultation, holding a public meeting, and that has certain notice timelines around it, and then eventual decision making. And then following that, there, of course, is a 20-day appeal window. So adding that all up with the limited council calendar remaining in 2021 makes it very difficult to meet that deadline. I would suggest maybe second quarter next year, perhaps June 2022 might be a little more realistic to look at this in more reasonable timeframes.
Okay, so councillors, my apologies for jumping ahead there and not voting on this, but I think we have a consensus that there is a concern worthy of pursuing a new bylaw with some changes has been discussed. So, Councillor Post or Taylor or Sherwood, can we move that date as per Mr. Ward as suggested? Okay. All right. So
I think that makes sense. It's really a non-issue moving forward. We still got a little bit of season left, but the reality is May 24th next year, this is going to rear its ugly head again. So I think Mr. Ward's timeline will work out just fine.
Very good.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can just get who the actual mover and seconder will be on this particular motion, please.
Okay, let's have a mover. Councillor Sherwood and a seconder. Councillor Post. All right. Any further conversation? Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Do we have to or want to capture an amendment to look at all sort of vehicles and equipment?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Are we on agreement with that, Councillor Sherwood and Post, who made this motion, that it's all, I think really all vehicles and equipment? I mean, somebody could put a bulldozer on their front lawn, for heaven's sake, or their front on their driveway. It's happened. So, all right, let's say all vehicles and equipment that would produce a hazardous condition or sightline problems.
Should I cancel the order for my Caterpillar loader then that I haven't ordered?
You got the D9 coming in, yeah. Okay, so with that amendment, all in favor?
Yes.
Very good. All right, and again, that was, again, my notice of motion at meeting regarding support for Choices Shelter. Any new business, councillors? Councillor Peters, and then Councillor Taylor, and then Councillor Sherwood.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Quickly through you, we have scheduled the fall tree planting. We missed the spring, obviously, and last spring because of COVID, but October 2nd at Harvey Curry Park, or the south ends of Every Kids Park there, we have many plantings and restricted capacity. So anyone interested has to sign up through the CBC website, but we're hoping to get up to 45 people there on Saturday, October 2nd.
Is the sign up open now?
It is, yes.
It is at the CBC website.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Sherwood.
Thank you, Your Worship. A shameless plug here for Theatre Orangeville. The big piece I think that we're all learning is diversity and inclusion and the importance of that in our society. And there's a wonderful play that Theatre Orangeville has on right now. It's called Josiah, and it is playing now until the 19th, and it is at Mount Alverno, and Mount Alverno is 5 minutes outside of Orangeville. And you can see that live, physically distanced, people wearing masks, very safe. And I'm going to see it on Thursday night, and I would encourage all people within our town to give your support to Theatre Orangeville, and B, see this wonderful play and maybe learn something. So for your consideration, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I just wanted to thank Mr. Osmond and particularly Sharon Doherty and the Recreation team, Public Works team on the fabulous summer series, concert series that was put on. I think it was really enjoyed by all. I know the shows that I saw were fabulous, and I think it was quite successful. People really enjoyed it, other than the one that got canceled due to the lightning coming in. But I want to let you know that our staff were fabulous, and we got lots of compliments from the entertainers and everyone else saying how well and great it was to work with them. So thank you again to our staff for that.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Sherwood, and thank you, staff. That's great. All right, moving on to question period. Madam Clerk, do we have any questions from the audience? Or
no one is on the line. Oh, wait, Dan said just to hold on a minute. There is someone on the line now.
Okay. Well, if the person that wants to ask a question, if they could press *6 and ask their question, please.
Mr. Mayor, and they left.
And they left. Okay. Very good. All right, moving on to item 19. This is the bylaws to be approved. A recommendation of the bylaws listed below be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw to permit the Kin Club of Orangeville to hold a road toll fundraising event at the intersections of 3rd Street and 4th Avenue on September 18th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. A bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw number 22-90 as amended with respects to parts 1 and 2, Plan 7R 6535 and part of Lot 5, Concession C, Geographic Township of East Garifraxa, Town of Orangeville, County of Dufferin, municipally known as 670 and 690 Broadway. A bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 22-90 as amended with respect to part of lots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 16, and 17, Block 1, Registered Plan 237, municipally known as 287A Broadway, and a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Orangeville at its regular and closed council meeting held on September 13th, 2021. We have a motion to approve those bylaws, please. Councillor or Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor, please. Thank you, and a motion to adjourn.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, sorry, just before you do that, with respect to Councillor Peters' pecuniary interest, that should just be stated in the public record for that matter.
Yes, my apologies. I know you reminded me of that, Madam Clerk, and I forgot. Earlier tonight, Councillor Peters had declared a pecuniary interest regarding fire hall issues. Thank you, Councillor Peters, for that. And again, can we have a motion to adjourn, please? Councillor Taylor, second by Councillor Peters, all in favor? All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Night all.
Good night.
I know.
Take care.
Night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.